Welcome to Having Fun with VHF. My name is Bob Witte, call sign K0NR from Monument, Colorado. Delta Mike 79. I was first licensed in 1977 after taking a ham radio license class at Purdue University. Go Boilers. My technical background is electrical engineering, and I've worked for decades in electronic test and measurement. My ham radio interests include a lot of things, but today I'm going to be talking about the confluence of VHF radio, mountains, and exploring. And when I say exploring, I mean hiking, backpacking, camping, four-wheel drive, just having fun in the outdoors and connecting that back with ham radio. And I do like to write stuff. I've got a lot of material out on my blog at K0NR.com. And I recently completed this book on VHF summits and more, and I'll use some of that material in this presentation. I'm going to talk about three main topics. Start off with VHF basics, and then talk about two areas of operating that I find enjoyable: VHF contests and summits on the air. So let's start with terminology. What is VHF? A lot of times I just use that term pretty loosely to mean anything above 50 megahertz in ham radio, but a more precise definition is 30 to 300 megahertz for VHF, and then for UHF 300 to 3000 megahertz. We're going to focus on the three most popular bands in this range: 6 meters, 2 meters, and 70 centimeters. Many people start out with using a handheld transceiver. Truly is a ham shack in your hand. It's affordable, it's compact, has an antenna, has a battery all ready to go, maybe a little programming to be done. Typically covers 2 meters and 70 centimeters with low power, about 5 watts. And the antenna it comes with is usually a rubber duck antenna. And I refer to those as convenient crummy antennas because they're certainly small and convenient, but they don't radiate that well. So one of the things we can talk about improving is our antenna. Another type of station is a basic VHF station I'm showing here, built around an FM mobile transceiver. Use a DC power supply connected to the AC outlet that provides 12 volts nominal power to the radio, and then we use coaxial cable to connect to a suitable antenna. In this case, I'm showing an FM mobile transceiver, and there's certainly a lot of things to be done with FM, and it's affordable, and so it's a common addition to ham radio stations. Let's go ahead and look at some other modes though. So single sideband is a very popular mode with the serious VHF crowd. It's much better than FM for weak signals. It's a huge difference. The calling frequency for single sideband is 144.2 megahertz, and we use upper sideband. We normally use horizontal polarized antennas for single sideband and the weak signal modes. Sometimes people have trouble finding activity depending on how populated your area is. So one thing you can do is check into your local nets on 2 meter sideband, and then also get involved with get on the air for the VHF contests. Another thing another type of radio that's common is the all mode transceiver. Now it used to be you could buy a 2 meter all mode radio that it was a single band radio with all the modes in there. Also 6 meter radios like that and so forth. And those are still available on the used market, but on the new market there's really only one truly all mode VHF UHF transceiver, and that's the IC 9700 from ICOM. Covers 2 meters, 70 centimeters, and 23 centimeters. That's 1.2 gigahertz. This is a really nice radio. I've got one. I love it. I use it. It is in a little bit different price class than your lower cost radios. They're currently going. These are going currently for about $1,500, but well worth the money. The other way you can get on 2-meter sideband is the Do Everything transceiver. These are radios that cover HF through UHF, and they do all the modes: CW, SSB, FM, AM, digital. A good example of that is the Yaesu FT991A. Nice radio and covers all those bands for about $1,200. And there are other models available as well. There are a number of really cool portable QRP rigs out there that can cover VHF. The one that's been around the longest is the FT817 from Yaesu, and then they updated it to the FT818, but very similar radio. The Elecraft KX3 is a popular HF plus 6-meter transceiver. Again, all mode. But then there is a 2-meter option that you can add to that and get on 2-meter sideband and CW that way. And recently introduced is the ICOM IC705. Depending on where you are in the world, you may not be able to buy one just yet. They're starting to ship in various parts of the world, and so stay tuned. That one's coming. There's a lot of buzz in the SOTA community about this new radio. For antennas, for 6 meters, we can use some of the same simple wire antennas that we use on HF. So you might put up a wire dipole antenna, or maybe an end-fed half-wave antenna, also made out of a wire. Or a more capable antenna would be a Yagi with maybe 3 to 5 elements, something like that. On 2 meters and up, those frequencies, we're going to tend to use a beam antenna, and that's going to be a Yagi typically. And again, horizontally polarized for single sideband and weak signal work. Antenna polarization is important for, we use vertical polarization for FM and the other mobile modes like DMR and D-Star. These are naturally omnidirectional antennas and very convenient for handheld, mobile, and base. Horizontal polarization is used for the weak signal modes. Better performance with, usually these are going to be directional antennas, although there are omnis available too. Typically when you have a directional antenna, you're going to need to point it in the right direction. So that does mean you need to have a rotor in the system to rotate that antenna to the right place. Here's some examples of vertical antennas. The Diamond X50A is very popular, and then there's a couple of Arrow antennas here, the dual band ground plane antenna, and then a J-pole. A lot of times people like to homebrew the J-pole antennas, and that's certainly an option. For horizontally polarized antennas, the M² HO loop is an example of an omnidirectional antenna that is horizontally polarized. Also, I'm showing two small Yagis. One's the 4-element Yagi from M². The other one is a 9-element Yagi. Wanted to talk a little bit about VHF propagation. When we teach our technician license class, we teach them that VHF is generally line of sight, and HF has the skywave propagation that provides for longer distance communication and working DX around the world. That's probably a pretty good way to explain it, but it is a little too simplistic, and often people get the wrong idea that VHF is strictly limited to line of sight. So here's that line of sight model. You got the curvature of the Earth there, and we got our radio operator with, sending a radio signal towards the horizon. Radio signals do go further than the optical horizon, so we've marked the radio horizon here. Typically, we'd say that's 15% or so further than the optical horizon. And we'll call that the line of sight region. That's where signals are going to be strong, and you'll have really solid communications under most conditions. But some people then think, okay, so the radio signal just stops at that point, right? Well, that's not right. The radio signal keeps on going. It kind of disperses out and may be refracted off of various particles in the atmosphere. It does keep going. The difference is in the non-line of sight region, we're going to see reduced signal levels, and so we need to factor that in on how we operate and the types of equipment we use. A similar thing happens when we're around mountains or other obstacles. You got your line of sight region. The signal is very strong in that region. Then it hits a mountain and is largely blocked. But there'll still be some signal that makes it over the mountain and into the non-line of sight region. There's a number of mechanisms for this. We might actually bounce the signal off an adjacent mountain. We might diffract it off the top of that mountain. A lot of different ways. In fact, that's part of what makes VHF so interesting when you're in the high country. Is it's often very difficult to predict how the signals are actually going to propagate and whether they'll make it or not. That's part of the challenge. So let's look at an example of Pikes Peak. That's a big, well-known mountain in our backyard here in Colorado. The optical horizon from Pikes Peak is 120 miles. And if we add that 15% in for the radio horizon, we'd say the radio horizon is at 138 miles. There's a place in Kansas that it's the high point in Kansas, Mount Sunflower, that can be easily worked from Pikes Peak. And that Mount Sunflower is 160 miles from Pikes. Also, we have an annual event where we operate from the mountains of Colorado, and we keep track of what the best DX has been from those mountains on 2-meter FM. And Phil, N0KE on Mount Bross, that's another 14,000 foot mountain, a little further west from Pikes Peak, worked Larry, N0LL, near Smith Center, Kansas. And that is for a distance of 375 miles. So that contact was made under fairly normal conditions. There's no special tropoducting or anything going on. And is a good example of how you can make contacts out hundreds of miles, well beyond line of sight using VHF. Also, skywave propagation is important for VHF. In particular, sporadic E propagation happens quite often. It is seasonal. It can happen any time of the year, but it's most common during the summer months. Occurs frequently on 6 meters and also on 2 meters, but much less frequently. So during the summer, it's really common for 6 meters to open up and just be filled with signals across the band as people work each other across North America. Most of that's going to be on single sideband or maybe FT8. F-layer propagation is the common propagation mode for the HF bands. That's how we work DX around the world on the HF bands. It also occurs on 6 meters, but we have to have intense sunspot activity for that to happen. We haven't seen that in recent years. Hopefully we'll see it in the near future. 6 meters is called the magic band. It's kind of a fickle band. Propagation is normally similar to 2 meters, kind of local area coverage, work people out to several hundred miles, that sort of thing with good antennas. But when the sporadic E comes in or the E skip occurs, the band comes alive. Calling frequency for single sideband is 50.125 megahertz, and then we move up in frequency as the bands get busy. And there is a DX window from 50.110 to 125 megahertz that's reserved for only from contacts to other countries, not within North America, or not within the United States. Uh, the FT8 digital mode has really taken off on 6 meters, very popular, works well with weak signals, and so we can compensate for that poor propagation or maybe our somewhat marginal antenna, our simple antenna. So FT8 is really become a big deal. So if you're interested in 6 meters, you probably want to have FT8 in your toolkit. Okay, so let's talk about VHF contests. When I think of VHF contests, I really just think of them as VHF activity weekend. Yes, we're going to keep score and all that, but really it's all about having a lot of people on the air at the same time so you can make a lot of radio contacts. As you'd expect, use the bands above 50 megahertz. The scoring is based on the number of grids that you work, so we use the Maidenhead grid system for that. Most contest activity is on SSB, also CW, FM, and FT8. FT8, and there's another variant that's called FT4 that's a little faster, are very popular, especially during contests, especially on 6 meters. Contest formats, we use all the bands above 50 megahertz. But 50 megahertz, 144, and 432 megahertz are going to be the most popular. You work every one you can on every band, so you can work a station multiple times by catching that station on different bands. Roughly speaking, the score is the QSO points, the number of QSOs you make, times the total grids worked. So working more grids can really improve your score. The grid locator system covers the entire planet, and we'll use the grid system that has grid locators that are 2 degrees of longitude by 1 degree of latitude. And this chart shows the first 2 characters from the grid. So sitting here in Colorado, I'm in the DM box here. And to the north of me is DN, Delta November, and to the south is Delta Lima. But DM covers a big region. But now we'll click in and look at the grids in Colorado as an example. And I'm sitting here in DM 79. Again, this is 1 degree of latitude and 2 degrees of longitude. You can see that that 16 grids covers the state of Colorado. In fact, the 4 on the west go some distance into Utah as well. So that gives you an idea how big these grids are. The contest calendar for North America, the ARL has three VHF contests, January, June, and September. And then CQ offers the worldwide VHF contest. The one thing that's different about that contest is it's only 6 meters and 2 meters. You can't use the other bands. Here's a picture of a VHF contest operation on Mount Herman. This is my buddy Stu, W0STU. You may have seen this picture before. It seems to be making its way into a number of ARRL publications. Stu here is operating one of those do-everything mobile radios connected up to an antenna, the Arrow dual band antenna for 2 meters and 70 centimeters on a camera or some kind of tripod. And he also had a wire antenna up in the trees for 6 meters. Here's an example of a station I used on Mount Evans. This was during the CQ Worldwide VHF contest. So I just had the 2 bands, 2 meters and 6 meters, had 2 Yagis up in the air for both of those on a mast that attached to the hitch on the SUV there. Here's a picture of that 9-element M² Yagi, nice size antenna for a portable operation. Not a little too big for backpacking, but certainly for going around in a vehicle, it's a nice size antenna with some decent gain. Rovers are different. Are a different category in the VHF contest because they get to move from grid to grid, and they make contacts in every grid. In fact, they can work the same stations over again whenever they enter a new grid, and so their score can accumulate quite rapidly as they move through different grids. Here's a picture of a rover station that Eric K0NR put together. That's a great call sign for a rover, K rover. And you can see there's a mast sticking up above the SUV, and he's got a number of Yagi antennas on there for various bands. So really, really capable rover station. And over here we see the map of what his rover route was, driving from grid to grid as efficiently as possible and working as many stations as he can. Okay, that's VHF contest. Let's talk about Summits on the Air, or SOTA. Summits on the Air, really there's two ways to participate. You can go to the top of a summit and be an activator, or you can be somewhere else and be a chaser and be contacting those activators that are on the summit. This is a worldwide program. It started in the UK and has spread to many countries, and very much up and running here in the US over the last I don't know, 5 to 10 years. It has a very robust point system and award system. So if you're interested in going after specific operating goals and earning awards and that sort of thing, SOTA, it has a lot of that. It's all very well thought out and established. As an example, we have over 1,800 SOTA summits in Colorado. I don't know how many are in the US. I'm sure many times that in the US. I'll show you a map of that in a minute. The SOTA activation does have some requirements. The summit must be on the SOTA list. There's a specific list for your area, and there's criteria that those summits had to meet before they were added to the list. So you don't just go out and grab some random mountaintop. The radio equipment must be carried to the summit. No minimum distance is specified, but the key point is it should not be attached to a vehicle when you're operating. It should be carried away from a vehicle. The whole idea is that it's a portable hiking kind of operating experience. The power needs to be portable as well, and fossil fuel generators are not allowed. So this means that most people are going to have a battery, maybe assisted by a solar panel or something like that. Lots of detail on the sota.org.uk website. Here's a map of the U.S. and showing all the SOTA summits, so you can see where they all are. As you might expect, on the western part of the U.S., we have a lot of mountains, so those states have plenty of dots on the map. And then the same is true on the eastern portion of the U.S. from Maine all the way down to Georgia. There's quite a few SOTA summits. This, by the way, is the SOTA Atlas that can be found at this URL. Now, you might think the Midwest is left out of this thing, but there actually are some hills there that are big enough to qualify for being SOTA peaks. And so you see Wisconsin actually has quite a few, Michigan, Minnesota has some, Arkansas has quite a few, Oklahoma has some, Texas has SOTA summits. Louisiana, I think, just has one, so that's a little sparse. And but if you look at where the SOTA summit's missing, Kansas is too flat, does not have any, and Florida does not have any. But depending on where you live, you may not be that far from a SOTA summit, and you go out and activate it, or you can always chase it, right? Get on the air and try and work those guys when they're active. So how do you do a SOTA activation? Actually, this is a VHF SOTA activation. I have to put the disclaimer out. I mean, most SOTA activity is done using the HF bands. Take your little QRP rig out in the woods, put up a wire antenna, and talk to people on HF. That's great. My interest is in VHF. Again, I like the interplay of getting up in the mountains and seeing what you can do on VHF. Height above average terrain makes a huge difference on the VHF and UHF bands. So that's what I do, and that's what I'm going to talk about here. The 2-meter FM mode is going to be most popular because that's what everybody has, right? Lots of people have radios that'll operate that band, and less so for single sideband and the other modes. So 2-meter FM is going to be the most popular. So an easy SOTA activation can just be take along a 2-meter handheld on your hike. So this is me a few years ago operating from Kaufman Ridge, 10,700 and some feet in elevation, and I've just got an HT there with a half-wave telescopic antenna attached to it to give me much improvement over the standard rubber duck antenna. In fact, this is an MFJ 1714 antenna, and it collapses down pretty nicely. Works really well. More recently, I've found a dual band version of that on Amazon. It's the RH770. If you search out there, you'll find it, and that's the one I carry the most right now. I probably should warn you all that that half-wave antenna is pretty long, and it does put some stress on the antenna connector of the handheld. So you want to be kind of gentle with it, and not have the antenna apply enough pressure to snap the connector off. Somebody told me that if you break your antenna connector on the handheld, it usually doesn't work very well after that. I think that's probably true. So here's your next step up. Go ahead and take, use the HT, but take along a small 2-meter Yagi antenna. And here I'm on Aspen Ridge, 10,700 and some feet, and I've got the Arrow 3-element Yagi for 2 meters. I'm holding it vertically polarized because I'm on FM with a handheld radio. Here's me operating from a higher mountain. This is Mount Sneffels at 14,150 feet. I've got a dual band Arrow antenna there. The vertical elements are for 2 meters, and the horizontal ones are for 70 centimeters. Of course, I'm hand holding it, so I can always just rotate it to whatever polarization I need. Here's a picture of Steve, WG0AT, on another 14er. Again, he's got a 3-element Yagi and a handheld radio, vertically polarized. We keep talking about HTs. They're certainly a good radio you can use for SOTA, but one thing I've learned is you really can use some more punch for that non-line of sight region. The signals are weak out there, so if you can increase your output power, you can improve your ability to contact stations. And again, you want to improve the antenna first. That's your first step, but you can also increase the transmit power. There are a number of very compact mini mobile transceivers. This one happens to be from Titera. I think it runs about 25 watts, and that's about the right power level to make a difference and not run your battery down too quickly. So that's something I commonly do now. Here's an interesting SOTA activation in New Mexico. It's Capulin Mountain. It's in northeastern New Mexico, and it's part of the it's in the national monument there. As the name implies, it's a dormant volcano. You can see the crater at the top, and it has a road going up up to the volcano. It doesn't get you quite to the top. It stops somewhere over here, and then you got to hike the rest of the way to the actual summit that's at 8,182 feet. So I wanted to activate that on for SOTA. The problem is, and I'm only going to do VHF. That's what I do. Problem is, it's 150 miles to a major population area. So I was really concerned I couldn't just count on people showing up on 2-meter FM. So what I did was took along single sideband equipment and a small Yagi, and then I made some schedules with some of the active VHF enthusiasts in New Mexico and Colorado, and it all worked out pretty well. Made a number of contacts. Here's a map of the situation, map of my best DX for the day. Is up here on Capulan Mountain, and I worked N7KA down in just outside of Albuquerque. That's about 184 miles. Turns out we couldn't quite make it on single sideband, but we switched over to CW and were able to make the contact on 2 meters. I also worked some other stations in New Mexico and some up in Colorado, so it all worked out really well. Back to Mount Herman, here's another SOTA activation. The interesting thing about this is I combined the VHF contest and a SOTA activation. This was in January VHF contest. I just used 2 meters and 70 centimeters on FM and SSB, made 17 QSOs in about an hour. My best DX for that one was up into Wyoming, about 140 miles away. And I've done this multiple times now, where if I see a VHF contest coming up, I'll go out and do a SOTA activation and do both at the same time. Here's a picture of David, KI6YMZ on Mount Elbert. That's the tallest mountain in Colorado. This was taken in August. You can see there's still snow on the ground. And once again, we see a 3-element Yagi for 2 meters, and he's got a handheld radio there. And just to be totally transparent, we always have these great pictures of the mountains and the blue skies and all that. Well, it doesn't always work out that way. Here's Steve, WG0AT, and Guy, N7UN, on another 14er. And yeah, the weather came in and it got cold and rainy, and they got fogged in. They couldn't see anything. And so Steve's trying to crank out a few contacts on his handheld radio. The goat here is Steve's goat, Rooster, who's no longer with us, but he often went out and hiked with Steve. And Guy is actually trying to warm his hands a bit on the back of the goat there. So it's not always warm and sunny. Okay, that's the material I wanted to talk about today, and we've got time for Q&A.